Hi, everyone. Welcome to Food Talk Live. A reminder that this episode will also appear on our podcast, Food Talk with Danny Nierenberg. So please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. Earlier today, most of my day was spent on a call, on a live cast with the Organic Trade Association. And I was talking to their CEO, Laura Batcha, and she was saying that she used to think that she had the best job in agriculture because she gets to meet with so many farmers and so many different people. But she decided that I actually have the best job in agriculture because I get to meet so many incredible people making change in the food system. And I do feel like the best part of my job is getting to meet so many people I respect and admire, whether they're in Senegal or here in the United States or other parts of the world. And I think Chef Marc Murphy is definitely one of those people I've admired and respected for a long time. Not only is he an amazing chef, an entrepreneur, a judge on one of my favorite shows, Chopped, but he is also someone deeply involved with issues in the food system. He is the president of the Manhattan chapter of the New York State Restaurant Association, a board member of City Harvest, Culintro, and Passport NYC at the 92nd Street Y Culinary Camp, as well as a member of the Food Plus Finance High Schools Industry Advisory Board. He's also a member of the Leadership Council for Share Our Strengths, No Kid Hungry campaign, and the national spokesperson for Dine Out for No Kid Hungry. During the Obama administration in 2012, he joined the U.S. State Department's diplomatic culinary partnership, where he took part in public diplomacy programs that engage foreign audiences abroad, as well as those visiting the United States. Marc's cookbook, Season with Authority, Confident Home Cooking, was released in 2015. And I think that book is probably now more important than ever since we're all sort of cooking more at home. And his podcast, Food 360, is an iHeartRadio podcast in collaboration with How Stuff Works. And it really offers a look at the world of food, bringing history, science, culture, and a lot of other topics to the table with stories from Marc's friends in the food industry. Most recently, he has discussed fishing in America, social justice issues in the restaurant industry, which is such a huge topic right now, and online shopping during COVID-19. I hope everyone will take a minute to subscribe to his podcast. It's really fun and interesting. And I also want to thank Marc for being a really, nice and great supporter of Food Tank. We are always really honored that he continues to support our work. So Marc, thank you so much for being with us today.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you very much.
I had to get all of my fangirling out of the way early on so that we can talk about all that's happening in the world of food and in the world in general.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I mean, I think it's very important to be talking about food issues. Obviously, my podcast, I try to keep it, we go into the heavy and we keep it on the light side. I kind of try to do a little bit of both because I think there's, for me, the name 360 came from really basically, I think everything touches food. And, obviously you're entrenched in this world as well. Right. And you've taken a very specific, piece of it and trying to help the world be better. And I think that's all we can really do. We can always try to do, we all need to do better all the time. There's no doubt about it. From, just you having dinner at home by yourself, eating the right thing, or trying to educate people on how to eat better food. I think that's something that I'm always trying to do. And, the show Chopped is something where the producers on Chopped, it's let's face it, it's a fun show and it's a lot of entertaining, but we always try to put underlying tones of education and teaching people. It's good when you can trick people into learning things when they're being entertained. And I think the producers do a good job of that. I think that, the show's been on for almost over 10 years and just educating people about ingredients is wonderful, and how different ways to make it and talking about them and how the judges would use them and how the contestants are using them. And it's beautiful. We have done episodes with ugly vegetables, which people, I'd say 10 years ago or 100 years ago, they were just vegetables. But then everybody started to cultivating them to grow a carrot 6 inches long, 1 inch wide, and so they could stack up nicely at the grocery store. But there's other carrots out there that don't look like that. Why are we throwing those away?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think Chopped is important because it sort of teaches people to make do with what they have, to like go into their refrigerators, look into their pantries, and be creative, because that's what all of those chefs are doing and what you're sort of instilling.
Yeah, I think during this whole lockdown period, I think I've gotten a lot of social media feedback of like, wow, it feels like I'm doing Chopped every night. I've got a can of this and of this and of this. I got to put it together. And by the way, you can make it work. And I think it's fun creatively to have that challenge. It's almost
Right.
like cooking with leftovers sometimes is almost more fun than cooking with fresh ingredients, because like I got to make this really good and it's something that's already gone a direction. I need to keep it going or change it's kind of fun.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. You started off with, this phrase, "everything touches food," right? And I think pre-COVID, what I like to call sort of BC, before COVID, we didn't, there wasn't that sort of sense that people had that everything touches food. But we've seen people become more involved and interested in where their food comes from than ever before. We've seen a real call from farmers and restaurant workers and the restaurant industry for making change and realizing that there's probably no going back to the way things were. And we've seen, how food processors and slaughterhouses are really affected by this. Our whole sort of food supply chain has been disrupted in interesting ways. Maybe some of it good. Well, we'll see what happens on the other side of this. But I wonder what your thoughts are for what the restaurant industry, what hospitality will look like, 6, 10, 18 months, I don't know, 2 years from now, in terms of how we think about food, because I don't think as many people were as aware as they are now.
I mean, look. There's a lot of different places in this country. I think that big cities like New York City are probably going to lose a lot of restaurants just because financially. And I think Gabrielle Hamilton wrote a great article in the New York Times where she basically started off with, does everybody need this many restaurants in New York anymore? A lot of people now are probably getting a lot of confidence in the kitchen by cooking for so much at home. They're probably going to be like, hey, wait a minute, maybe I could do this more often myself at home. And it's probably healthier for your family. It's definitely healthier for your wallet. I think I actually talked to somebody yesterday who said that they were living in New York and they were cooking at home, and they got takeout from some restaurants. And they're like, you know what? I like the home cooking better sometimes. So I was like, sometimes it depends where you're ordering from. But not to knock restaurants, but I think restaurants are going to survive. I mean, some of them are going to survive. The good ones, they're going to definitely they're going to rise to the top and rise to the occasion. We have to remember restaurants are out there fighting not just giving jobs, but also they're right behind everybody. I mean, cancer research, restaurants show up to fundraise. I mean, restaurants and chefs are constantly taking care of the rest of the world. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. But I do think one thing, and I do think that I always look at things, the glass is half full. I'm really excited. Obviously wasn't excited about what happened to the world right now, but I think it is making a really good awareness. And one of the things I think that if people are much more aware of now is probably the idea that restaurant workers are so important. Like I don't think they were sort of revered, or they weren't looked up to as much as they should have been. I, as a chef and being in having been in the restaurant business, I know how important every dishwasher, every busboy, every waiter, every prep cook is. But people that just go to restaurants, all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait a minute, these are essential workers. Like these people are feeding people. And I think that to me just sort of, it's hopefully there's more respect for our industry in that sense. And then going all the way down the food chain, let's say, from the farmers that are picking the food, the farmers that are growing the food, the truck drivers that are delivering the food. We just see now how important every one of those jobs is. And I really do hope that the trickle down effect of not just the thought process of how more important these people are, but all these people should be getting paid more probably as well. And then you're not people aren't being taken advantage of, because I think that's super, super important. I think that we in our country pay way too little for food in general. I think most countries, people spend a lot more of their income on food. Food is important. And I think that people don't, if you think of food as gasoline, when you go to the gas tank, you're going to put the crappy gas in the tank. Well, you're not going to work as well. But it's important what you're putting in your body. And I think that people getting more aware of what they're putting in their body and who's growing and who's fishing it, who's raising it, it's all so, so important.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this all the time. What was really invisible to a lot of folks is now completely visible. You know, that shroud or whatever has been lifted on the food industry, whether we're talking about processing plants or restaurant workers. And, you know, I often say I don't trust anyone who hasn't like worked on a farm or worked in a restaurant, because I've done both. And I think that, you know, the skills you learn and are really important. I also think that, you know, in some ways, restaurants have served as, and I've read this from different journalists, have served as safety nets, right? For folks. Like, you know, I put myself through school working at a restaurant. Our co-founder, Bernie Pollock, did the same thing, working, you know, behind the bar, you know, but you know, getting back to what you said, we need to pay and respect these workers more. You know, we shouldn't be paying them just $2.10 an hour and expecting them to live off tips. There needs to be a better value system in place that really encourages people to look at it as a profession and not just as a way to, you know, sort of make ends, you know, it should be a career and not just something that you do.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, having been in the restaurant business, I mean, I do still agree that tips should exist because it gives an incentive for them to take care of their guests. It's as a business person, you don't want to just, you know, pay people and then hopefully they just do their job. But I mean, I think that everybody should be incentivized to do more. I mean, that's what our values are built on. If you can work and if you can, you know, put yourself out there and work harder, you're going to make more money. So I think tips are a great way for that to happen. But I do agree that everybody. I mean, I love the idea that it would become more of a profession because yes, I mean, in New York, you know, there's a lot of singers and dancers, they're coming through, but they do this, but some of them just end up staying in the restaurant business because they like it so much. I mean, I had a manager who worked for me once, put himself through law school. When he was done with law school, he was like, I don't know why I did that. I love this business. I don't want to be a lawyer. So I was like, what a waste of money. But anyway, he stayed in the restaurant business. Actually, he went into the wine business as well after that. But it's definitely, you know, it's a beautiful, beautiful business, and there's beautiful people that work in it, and I think it's a heart and soul. We in restaurants and food, I mean, employs more people than anybody, really. I mean, it's really up there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, instilling some sort of way to move up in the restaurant, like when you start working at a restaurant, if there's like a path to
Right.
doing different kinds of things that will encourage people to stay on and learn different skills and really incentivize them, which is what you said before, dude.
But you're absolutely right. But like in a restaurant, it's constantly that way. The amount of times I've worked with a dishwasher who's being paid minimum wage, and I mean, there's the minimum wage isn't supposed to be. I mean, it's supposed to be not as much, but you want to incentivize people to work harder, right? So yes, you want them to be able to make a living on minimum wage, of course, but you don't. I mean, you see the dishwasher who's really pushing. He wants to be a prep cook, and then turns into a line cook, and then he becomes a sous chef, and then he becomes a chef, and he becomes his own restaurant. And that is just a beautiful story of somebody who really worked hard, who was passionate about what they do, and wanted to move their way up. And I think that there should be that opportunity for everybody. And I think that, you know, but yes, of course, I think that definitely everything needs to go up. Everything's more expensive now.
Absolutely. I'm wondering why, you know, you focus now on doing events through your company and less on the restaurant side. What was that transition like for you? And do you see the same sort of incentive for, you know, folks moving up who work with you?
Well, listen, I mean, I was rebuilding my restaurant in Tribeca that was landmark for 16 years. I closed it down. I closed all my restaurants down, and I still own the building down there, and I'm revamping it into an event space. Of course, I'm halfway through construction and everything happens, so nobody's doing anything right now. So I'm actually not doing anything right now, but doing my podcast and trying to do stuff with the Food Network. But yeah, look, events, I wanted to really sort of concentrate, and I can't wait to see what comes out on the other side of this, because I don't even know what events are going to look like. I mean, what are gatherings going to look like? We don't know. There's not many rules and regulations out, and there's still just more questions than there are answers. But, you know, I think, you know, concentrating and doing events for smaller groups, and then that's sort of just the way I wanted to sort of veer my direction. And the other thing is, you know, you can do a lot of fundraising that way as well for people that want to do things. So little dinners for 30 people, cultivation events. And, you know, I just sort of, I guess I got out of the restaurant rat race. I mean, I had 5 restaurants in New York. I had 650 employees, and Well, right now I'm pretty lucky not to have all that because it would
Right.
it would be very difficult. But there's I did a lot. I did that for a long time, and now I'm just sort of regroup. Now, of course, I'm really regrouping. I'm not really sure what direction we're going to be going in, but I'm still planning ahead on my demo kitchen and my thing and doing that. But I'm not 100% sure where I'm going yet.
Well, and there will definitely, I mean, we will all gather again, and there will be this need for, like what you mentioned, that nonprofit fundraising. I mean, so many chefs have donated to food tank events in the past. We've had, events at restaurants. That's an important part of what you, as you said before, the restaurant industry does. It gives back. And I think being able to have those events again, whether they're smaller and people are sitting farther apart, there's a real need for people to gather around food again.
No, absolutely. And I think it's going to look different, and we're going to have to just deal with it like restaurants always deal with it. It's like things change, bob and weave. That's all you can do.
Right. People evolve. We'll get through this, and I think we'll come out on the other side better for it. I mean, your podcast, Food 360, you get to talk about these things every day. What interests you, and or every week, what interests you, and what makes sort of you think about food, and your guests think about food, and why it's important. What have been your favorite sort of episodes so far?
Well, for me, my podcast is really it's an extension of my brain going a different direction constantly, because I'm one of those people that keeps to want to. I was described once from my director of operations, he was on the ground holding onto my ankle, going, "Mark, come back down. I know you're going this way. You want to go that way?" Because I always want to do a million things. I mean, right now I'm reading a great book about the history of the citrus, right? And I'm dying to get this person. I can't remember her name right now. The author on the podcast. But then I also have who did I have on the? I had Ruth Reichel on the other day. I mean, talk about a beautiful person, and talking about her book that she wrote, Delicious, which was wonderful. And I literally texted her after I finished reading it, practically weeping, like I love the character Lily in the book, things like. But then I had the founder of Seed to Table. Seed to Table is a great company, but they're doing great things with fishing and trying to keep it sustainable and getting fish to people's homes. I've been ordering from them during the COVID time right now. From having a friend of mine like Aaron Sanchez, and just shooting the breeze with the guy, talking about his life and the book that he wrote and what he's doing. And it's just been wonderful. It's wonderful because I'm not locked into anything. Some are lighter, some are not as, but there's basically, as I always say, there's just so many, everybody's touched by the restaurant or by food. We all have to do it. We all got to eat every day, hopefully.
Absolutely. And I like that you're combining sort of the serious with the light. There's really a need for that right now as people struggle to sort of get through their days, which I think are longer for some folks than they used to be. Just being able to learn new things, hear those different voices, and really have a different perspective on food.
Yeah, I mean, I think just hearing. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, when I listen to podcasts, I usually go running, or I'm always like walking around listening to a podcast, and I love the just being versatile like that. You can catch somebody one day, it's like, oh wow, they're really learning something, and the next time maybe they're just being entertained by a conversation with a friend and just about the food industry. But it's getting a little bit of insight from the back of the house or whatever it might be. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. We've mentioned the work you do for nonprofits, and No Kid Hungry is such an important organization because of the work they do to improve food security for children in the United States. This is a really tough time for a lot of kids and a lot of parents. And I'm wondering, what your perspective is on how we should be supporting groups like No Kid Hungry. What more can we be doing in terms of recognizing childhood malnutrition and food insecurity in the United States, because I think people just assume that that's not a problem here when it actually is. And especially now with so many kids out of school and summer looming and less and less programs that will be able to feed kids throughout the summer.
I mean, it's interesting. Sure Strength, No Kid Hungry. I mean, I've been working with them for, I don't know, over 10 years. And first of all, Billy Shore and his sister, they started this organization. They're just wonderful, wonderful people with ginormous hearts. Let's put it that way. But what I love about their organization is that they help other organizations. They help kids eat food in this country. And people don't understand that kids are hungry. And they do a very good job of telling the story. And one of my favorite quotes that Billy Shore always says is like, and the other that not only do they get money and they help organizations feed children, but then they also represent hungry children, because as he says, those hungry children do not have lobbyists in Washington, D.C. So Share Our Strength, No Kid Hungry is in Washington, D.C. That's where they're based. And they're there representing those kids that are hungry. When it comes time to, when Congress is going to have a bill passed or whatever, they are there in droves. I've been there knocking on the doors, lobbying, and not lobbying, whatever you call it, when you go talk to all the congressmen or whatever and talk to them about these kids. It's just so important. And it's, people don't understand that our country, one of the richest countries in the world, our kids are hungry. I mean, it doesn't make sense, but there's a lot of things that need to be fixed. And I love what you guys were just doing. I was reading a little earlier about, about trying to get Congress to understand that it's not just the big farms that need the subsidies, it's the little farmers. And I think we need a lot more little farmers. And that's the other thing I'm sort of in my mind, because as my glass half full perspective is, maybe this is going to wake people up and go, wait a minute, I had this nice job in a big city, but my grandparents own that farm and they need help. And you know what? I have 2 kids, and you know what the hell am I doing here? Let me go back to the farm and raise my kids on a farm and raise cattle, raise chickens, grow food and live off of the land. I think that little farms like that are very important. And who am I telling? I'm telling you. What do I get? You know about this. I mean, it's just, I think it's a beautiful thing. There's nothing more satisfying than planting something and watching it grow. I mean, I myself at my house, of course, I've been reading up and learning about victory gardens, which after World War I and World War II were very, very in vogue. Anywhere in front of post offices, anywhere, people were planting these little gardens to grow food. And it's like, wait a minute, not just during bad times we should be doing that. We should, if you have a big plot of grass in the front yard, why don't you plant some vegetables? You don't have to spend the money going to the store and buying the gas to get there and the packaging to bring it home. I've got lettuce growing. It's going so fast, I'm ready to start feeding it to the rabbits, because it's amazing how quickly it grows. I can't eat it fast enough.
Yeah, no, I get it. This is the first time that either my husband or I have been in one place, because we both travel for work a lot, that we've been able to grow food on our balconies and like really have, nice lettuce and kale starting. And it's, there is something so satisfying about that. And your point about the need for more, small and medium-sized farms, I think that seems obvious to people like you and me, but what we've seen during this pandemic is it's those small and medium-sized farms that are able to get food to consumers more quickly. Those regionalized food systems where, those small farms pivoted much more quickly than big food has, and while big food's still making a lot of money, you have these small farms who are like, okay, we're going to do direct marketing to consumers. We're going to have, a delivery CSAs or subscription boxes so we can feed people directly, in cities. And it's just been really, really inspiring to see for me, Mark, because, I feel like, we've been fighting this uphill battle, all of us, around, making sure that small and farms who are often, growing what's called specialty crops, but it's actually the food that people eat. It's the fruits and vegetables and nutritious grains, fighting in the Farm Bill for them to get more recognition. And I think maybe, like, as you said before, it's an aha moment for folks, whether they're policymakers or regular eaters, like, we need to support these farmers because they're growing the food that actually nourishes us all.
And that's also interesting when you look at this farm question. And I did a thing with Ariane over at D'Artagnan and talking about the farms that are specifically growing things that mostly get sold in restaurants. Right. And to me, for example, like a quail farm or a squab farm or a rabbit farm or, snail farm, whatever, these people are growing these foods that mostly are used by chefs in fancy restaurants. Danielle Boulud's cooking that and everybody else is cooking that. But, and to me, I've been trying to do things on my social media like, hey guys, look, it's not that hard to cook a quail. And by the way, they're delicious. You don't have to have a really big cooking degree to know how to cook this little bird. It's absolutely fantastic. And those farmers are suffering because 99% of their crops or their produce, their product was going right to restaurants. So same thing with oysters, right? I mean, oysters, who shucks oysters at home? I mean, besides crazy people like me. I mean, you usually go to a restaurant, you order a bottle of wine and 2 dozen oysters and they show up, but they're not easy to shuck. So I want people to sort of understand that these are other things and the other thing to me, when you talk about that and the variety and these varieties of things, I think health-wise, it's a big deal. I mean, I grew up in Europe where you ate, all sorts of different proteins. You didn't just, I mean, in America, we're eating cows, we're eating chickens, and we're eating beef. And after that, everybody's scared. And this drives me nuts. So it's like you should be varying your diet. It's not healthy just to eat the same thing over and over. And I think that, we need to sort of, there's a lot of good reasons to learn how to cook the foods that you might not be aware of or understand. Once again, let's go back to Chopped. I mean, that's what I love about that show, seeing the enthusiasm of the contestants, but also seeing the enthusiasm for the products and for the different products that we're cooking on those shows.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought up this point, because I think so many of us, especially now because we're spending more time in the kitchen, are intimidated by food. And we're like, we keep ordering or, getting the same kinds of, like you mentioned, protein or vegetables. But there's there's such an, I know I keep saying this, but there's such an opportunity with this pandemic, despite the tragedy of it all, to explore our palates, to explore seasonality. I mean, I think that's one thing that might come out of this, that our palates are retrained to eat more seasonally, because we'll be eating what's available. We won't be able to get as many things, as often as we could before. But I don't think that's a bad thing if we're eating seasonally, because, the health point that you mentioned, eating foods that are grown close to home at the time that they're supposed to be eaten, they often have a lot more nutrients, and that's what's going to protect us from COVID-19 and a whole range of other diseases.
No, absolutely. I think eating locally, and there's the other thing. It's just about, as a chef and having had restaurants all these years, is the excitement of a new season. I mean, there's something to be said for, oh my gosh, the good strawberries are coming.
Right.
Not those crappy winter ones that you get, but when the good strawberries show up, it's mind blowing. It's like, oh, this is what it's supposed to taste like. And that's because it's in season. It's probably grown not too far away. And that goes with everything. You're absolutely right. I mean, I don't even know about the nutritional value of it, but I know that my palate value is off the charts, because when you're getting a really good peach at the right time of the year, at the right season, that there's nothing like it. I mean, we all know that. And that's hard as a chef, when you know the ingredients and you know what they're supposed to taste like, and you get product that's inferior. Which this is the one thing that used to drive me crazy. Having restaurants in New York, we have to serve a burger all year round. And I would sometimes look at the tomatoes coming in and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's December. What am I going to do? Yell at the purveyor? It's like, who wants a tomato on their that looks like that on their hamburger? But it's such a tradition, so it's like you have to do it, and there it is. But it's tricky.
Yeah, it is tricky, but I think that there's something that will come out of this that will change how we eat and how we produce food, and it will be positive. It will be beneficial. It will be for the betterment of eaters and producers and everyone along the food chain. I know you have a passion for the arts as well, and it's not just restaurants that are closed right now and people sort of suffering in that industry. It's also theater and the arts. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, how Broadway is not going to open for the rest of the year, which is mind-boggling to me. And I'm a fan, but theater isn't my life. And I feel like that's just what a loss to the world, all these beautiful sort of things that we won't be able to see.
It absolutely is, but once again, glass half full. I got to tell you, I know that I know that there's the theaters aren't there and the things aren't happening. But the other night, I got an email from a friend of mine who actually is a ballet dancer, and another person who I know who's crazy enough, a philosophy professor who also writes poetry. Anyway, I got this email saying at 4:00 we're doing a performance. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the innovation and the what happens. I literally sat in front of my computer for about an hour and 15 minutes, and I watched a collaborative dance piece on my computer with 9 different boxes, and it was amazing music. And then there was another, but by the way, the pianist was in Berlin, and the dancers were, I think, some in California and some in New York. And then all of a sudden, my friend, also the philosophy professor, did a poetry reading halfway through. And I was like, you know what? I mean, of course, we miss the arts, but it's amazing to see the ingenuity and the things that we're learning.
Yeah.
We would not have known how to do that unless it was for this pandemic, right? This
Absolutely.
something like that. And this is one thing I love to ask people, doesn't matter, food business or not, when this is over, because it will be over, we're all going to sort of go back to normal, but what have you picked up from this pandemic that you're going to keep carrying on later on? And for me, I'll answer my own question, is I have a very good friend of mine in Rome, Tina, and my good friend Dennis, who lives in Connecticut right now. We've known each other for 25 years. She lives in Rome, he's in Connecticut, I'm in New York. We're going to have a drink together tonight. And I'm like, why didn't I think of this earlier? Why would I wait till I get on a plane and go to Rome to see her? I mean, the three of us can sit down and have a cocktail this evening. I mean, it's a different hours, time zone. She might be done with dinner, but it's one of those things. Like, yes, we're learning something new, and technology is proving it that we are better than that, and we can learn new things, and we can adapt, and from the arts to food to food delivery to all sorts of stuff.
Absolutely. I think technology, I'm so interested in technology in the food system for so many different ways, but you're right. Until this pandemic, I didn't realize I could have like a happy hour with my friends in New Orleans when, when it was 4 o'clock my time and, 3 o'clock their time. Like there's all these great fun things that have come out of it, and also really important ways that technology will help us get through this. It's not just social media. It's how, we've shifted to online marketing for small farms. It's how, scientists are predicting how this pandemic will spread, the impact it will have on farmers in sub-Saharan Africa through using, big data and artificial technology. There's a whole range of things that are happening that we don't even know about, but they've come about because of this pandemic. And again, I don't want to dismiss the tragedy of the times that we are in, but there's also so much, like you said, having the half glass full, looking at the world that way. There's a lot we're learning about ourselves and this time of reflection and how we can get through things and sort of resiliency. We're learning a lot because of the uprisings that are going on and the lack of empathy and the lack of equality that we've seen in this country. So there's a lot really sort of stirring all at the same time. And I do feel really, maybe it's the wrong word to use, but I feel excited about it. I feel excited about what's going to come next.
Yeah, there is an energy about this, and I think that there's a lot of hurt and there's a lot of pain, but the energy I think can be used for good as well. And it was interesting. I was talking to somebody who had been around in the '60s during the the riots, the race riots back then, and things like that. And it was like the difference. I said, what was the difference between then and today? And it sort of brought a tear to my eye, because it's like, well, today it's much more diverse, the population that's out there, and it's much more worldwide, people that are upset about what's going on. And I think it's a good thing. It means more people are awake, more people are listening, more people are understanding. And that's all you can do. You can educate people can understand the problem and understand and talk about it. I think that, a lot of people, there's these problems. People think, oh, you have so many problems, but sometimes it's just like, wait, we do, but at least we're talking about it. That means we're moving forward. If we're not talking about it, that's when it's a bigger problem, I think.
Yeah, it's when there's silence. And I think there had been silence for so long for so many folks, and now we're breaking that silence. And it's just like what, going back to making the invisible visible. We didn't respect food workers, and now maybe we will. And, now we're hearing from voices that we should have been hearing from long ago, and respecting them and honoring that, and realizing, that we were blind to so many things.
Right. And I think that, I think it from top down, I think everything's got to sort of be looked at carefully. I mean, I always say, I think that everybody, people that should be running these governments in this world should probably be chefs, because they have so much more empathy than anybody else. I think they feel they like to take care of people. I think they should be in office. I think we'd have a better world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I wonder, before we started the recording on the live cast, you were talking about what you ate for lunch. Have you had, sort of any great food revelations, cooking new things that you wouldn't have cooked before during this time?
It's interesting, because I don't know if you've ever been to a Pastis in New York City, but it's a great restaurant, and it's one of the things I always get when I go there is the sardines in a can. And I was like, the other day, I was so missing that dish. And I was like, so I bought a bunch of them, and you get the good, the good ones in olive oil. There's nothing better than making yourself a little salad and open up a can of sardines. I mean, they're so good for you. Sardines are like,
Right.
full of those oils, and they're really good for your body, and they're wonderful. But that's one of the things I've been really sort of craving at lunchtime, which has been a kind of fun. But what have I been cooking? I mean, I've been really, oh gosh, I mean, just getting my hands on whatever I can, and I have a really good friend of mine. His name's Ace, and he's not a chef. He's in the music business, but he's a big Japanese cook. He loves Japan, and he loves Japanese food, and he loves to cook. He's a very good chef. He's a very great cook. Anyway, so he bought me a Japanese book, and the other day he stopped by with a huge bag of all these ingredients that I'm just not used to cooking with. I'm, mirin and sake, and those aren't. It's basically, they're not in my wheelhouse. I sort of equate it to, when you go to a performance, you see something through the proscenium arch, and you just want it. That's all you want. You want to see how the sausage is made behind the stage, right?
Right.
And that's sort of the way I felt about Japanese food in a certain sense. I love it. I mean, I love Japan. I love the food. I love the culture. I love it all. But I was like, you know what? I'm so entrenched in my cooking. It's French, it's Italian, it's basically American. Those are my tools.
Yeah.
And he's really inspired me to start messing around with some of these ingredients. I was making a vinaigrette the other night, and I was like, it's too sweet, too much mirin. I'm not used to it. And that's something I've been learning and really loving, actually, is getting to know a different cuisine. And I think that in this time, I've got 6 people at my table every night in this quarantine, and they're kind of getting sick of my regular food. But that's the things you get. But so I'm trying to vary it up, and I was trying to do some more, go a little some Chinese direction, and now going Japanese, and it's really fun. It's as a chef or as a cook or as a person, you can always explore. You can control what's going on in your kitchen, and it's a beautiful thing. So yeah, I've been playing around with that stuff, and it's been really eye opening. I've been having a lot of fun.
That's great. Experimentation is key. You have to sort of deal, at least if you're not a chef like you also have to deal with failure, which is what I've been learning, and sort of just like not letting it get you down when your experiment goes wrong. I'm wondering what a few bits of advice you have for home cooks. I mentioned your cookbook before. What should they be doing right now during this? I mean, people are still ordering takeout. People are still, sort of relying on comfort foods, and I don't expect that to end. But what would what are your suggestions for sort of shaking things up a little bit during the pandemic?
I mean, my first thing is, I say this before the pandemic. People get hesitant, they're hesitant of cooking, right? So the first thing you need to do is you need to be comfortable with knives. You need good knife skills. Once you feel like you have a good command of a knife, and you can take now, I guess, probably some online knife classes. I mean, I've been doing some on my Instagram. But it's interesting that once you know how to control and wield a knife, and basically, if I watch somebody struggling, it takes them 10 minutes to peel and chop an onion. It takes me, 35 seconds. I'm like, well, of course that person doesn't like to cook. It takes you 10 minutes to peel an onion. What's it going to take the rest of the time? It's going to take you a lot longer. So I think control of your tools and understanding how to use them and feeling confident about it. It's like, exactly. It's like, if you don't know how to ride a bike, it's not that fun to ride down the street, right? And it's really easy to ride a bike if you know how to ride a bike, right? Sort of one of those things. So that for one. And the other thing is not to be scared of experimenting. I think that experimentation, I mean, first of all, we're cooking food that you're not, if you screw it up, it's not the end of the world. I mean, try not to waste food, of course, but if you're teaching yourself, I think it's important, and finding recipes, like, for example, like there's, if you want to do a minestrone, talk about knife skills. You can take all your vegetables and dice them into little pieces and make your minestrone. You're going to have a lot of knife skill practice there. So finding recipes that you can do. And also, I think doing recipes over. If you did it once, do it again and do it again, because there's nothing more like practice makes perfect. That's an easiest thing to do. And you can always refine. And the other thing, when I do demos, when I used to go to those food festivals and do demos, I'm always like, don't learn this recipe, but think about the techniques and how else you can adapt them. Make this, but just realize you don't have to be blinders on and being like, I'm just doing this recipe. Like, think of this recipe, follow a recipe, do a recipe, but keep some peripheral vision. Like, oh wait, but I have a bunch of scallions back there that aren't going to be good tomorrow. But can I throw those in as well? Yes. if even the recipe doesn't say it, but there's onion in it. I mean, don't go put it in your apple pie, but I'm put it in your, if you're chopping up some onion and you're going to roast a chicken with it, I've got a couple scallions that need to go in there. Toss them in. What the heck?
No, all of that makes sense, and it's really good advice. And I love your suggestion about skills. I mean, I think cooking skills and just sort of, whether it's knife skills or other tools, that's been lost in this country, right? Like I don't have great knife skills, but I learned enough from my mom, both of my parents, but mostly my mom, to know how to chop an onion. But there are lots of folks who don't know how to do that. But thanks to YouTube and all of these things, people can learn that sort of now. But we need to maybe think about the future of food is also learning those skills sort of early on.
Absolutely. And by the way, it's a great dating tool too. If you know how to cook, that helps.
The way to anyone's heart, for sure.
I mean, look, girls love a guy that can cook, and guys love a girl that can cook. It works.
Absolutely, absolutely. Before we get any further, I want to give people some websites where they can find out more information about you. They can go to marc-murphy.com. They can go to your /podcast, so marcmurphy.com/podcast to get more info about that. Any other websites you want to give out?
I mean, I think, very important is if you want to learn more about No Kid Hungry, Share Our Strength, go to their website, shareourstrength, probably .org. I don't remember it off the top of my head. But nokidhungry.org, I think it is. But there's definitely charities out there that you should be aware of. I am also on the board of City Harvest. For people in Manhattan, they're feeding, so many, countless amounts of people in Manhattan. There's so many people out of work. There's so many people that are hungry, but City Harvest is doing such a great job. They're a food rescue organization. Jilly Stevens, who runs that, is basically, she should be running the world as far as I'm concerned. She's amazing, an amazing organization. And she's just, it's an important time. It's important for all of us to take care of each other. And I think that's important.
Absolutely. And we'll have all of those websites available on our website, foodtamp.com. But City Harvest, No Kid Hungry, Share Our Strength. These are the people who are making sure we, along with farmers, are making sure we all, that our compatriots get fed, that the people who, were living paycheck to paycheck and then COVID hit, people who never had to rely on food aid before, who now have to rely on it, the millions of Americans who are unemployed or underemployed, those organizations are really going to help them out. So please give whatever you can, or please volunteer your time safely. Marc, my last question for you is, who is inspiring you the most right now? You mentioned Jilly and you mentioned Billy from Share Our Strength, but is there another person who's really giving you a lot of hope?
For me right now, inspiration's coming through cooking and watching other people cook on Instagram and things like that, and just seeing people just being home and taking a moment and spending and sharing meals with their family. I think that's all those people that are doing that. And I obviously follow a lot of chefs on Instagram, like Eric Repair and Danielle Boulud, and they're doing great work with the World Central Kitchen. They're doing great stuff. But then all of a sudden you see, Eric making something really simple and beautiful and elegant on his Instagram story. And it just warms your heart to see that. It's like, wow, you know what? Yes, he's a chef at La Bernardin, and it's a very fancy restaurant, but he's got to feed his family too, because his family doesn't want to eat all that fancy stuff all the time either. They just want a piece of grilled salmon someday, So, and that's what they're doing. So those things it's inspiring, but I think it's just, I'm inspired by everybody that's going to hopefully, as I said, take something positive out of this experience and keep it going. And let's remember the respect we need for food, remember the respect we need for the people in the food industry, and the respect for everybody, towards each other. I think it's important.
Absolutely. It's such a great point to end on. Thank you so much for joining me, Marc. A reminder that this episode will also appear on our podcast, Food Talk with Danny Nuremberg. And I hope folks will join us on our next episode, when I'll be talking to Natalie Schmulik from the Hatchery, a food incubator in Chicago. Marc, please stay well. The world needs you. Thanks so much for all of
Thank you so much. Great to see you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.